All right, we'll go ahead and get started in the interest of time. Thank you again for joining us. My name is Jason West. I'm the Vice Chairman of the North Korea Freedom Coalition, and I have the pleasure of being the co-chair of our working group on North Korean women. We're also joined in the audience. She wasn't able to join us live today, but my fellow co-chair, Ann Bawalda of Jubilee Campaign, is with us as well. And just on behalf of the North Korea Freedom Coalition, I did want to thank all of our sponsors, including the Defense Forum Foundation, Freedom Speakers International, Jubilee Campaign, and the Isabella Foundation for helping make this event possible today. There will not be a live Q&A for this event today, but if you do have questions, please do feel free to reach out to us. But in the interest of time, we will be only doing a moderated Q&A today. All attendees are joined in listen-only mode. So with that, I will turn it over to Suzanne Scholte, Chairman of the North Korea Freedom Coalition.
It's my great pleasure to welcome you as the chair of the North Korea Freedom Coalition to our panel, Unshackle, the Women of North Korea. We are grateful to be part of the 66th UN Commission on the Status of Women. Once again, since we first began our outreach in 2016 to be sure the human rights situation for the women of North Korea would be addressed every time. I want to express my thanks to Ann Bawalda, Jason West, and Sydney Cochan of the Jubilee Campaign for their leadership in making this panel possible, and to Casey Lartigue and Anku Lee of Freedom Speakers International for finding us such outstanding witnesses. I am proud to call them all my friends and colleagues as active members of the North Korea Freedom Coalition. Our coalition works very closely with North Korean defectors, NGOs, and individuals all throughout the world to promote the freedom, human rights, and dignity of the North Korean people. We welcome everyone who cares about the people of North Korea to join us in our work. Our motto is Acta Non Verba. Before I introduce two wonderful young women, I want to just briefly give you some facts about North Korea and the women of North Korea, especially. Most of you know that the people of North Korea are considered among the most suffering in the world. Most of you know that Kim Jong-un is a brutal dictator committing crimes against humanity and gross violations of human rights every day that have no parallel in the modern world. But I want to explain why we selected the topic, Unshackle the Women of North Korea. We continue to be inspired by what the women of North Korea have done to change things in North Korea and help us understand North Korea. Not a lot of people are aware of this, so let me cite just a few facts. It is a fact that the women of North Korea literally saved the country during the arduous march, because during the famine in North Korea, it was the women who created the market system out of sheer desperation to feed their children, their husbands, their mothers and fathers. The public distribution system, which made the entire population completely dependent on the regime for survival, broke completely down during the 1990s. And this period triggered massive starvation. Men had to work every day, even though they were not paid. So North Korean women became capitalists and free marketers. Markets spread all over the country. Then dictator Kim Jong-il first attempted to shut down the markets completely. Then he attempted to control access to them through multiple restrictions, but all these attempts failed. Significantly, in December 2009, the regime tried something new to reassert control over the North Korean economy. It issued a new currency, but there was such overwhelming hostile reaction to the currency devaluation, the regime did something it had never done before. It apologized and backed off, allowing the market system to continue. And Pak Nam-ji was blamed for the currency reform and executed in March 2010 by firing squad in Pyongyang for the offense of being, and I quote, a son of a bourgeois conspiring to infiltrate the ranks of revolutionaries to destroy the national economy, unquote. This was an amazing turn of events. North Korean women pushing back against the regime not only apologizing, but officially acknowledging their own failure and allowing these markets to continue. So capitalism won, and the markets created by the North Korean women prevailed. Because of the border shutdown and the drop of the number of defectors escaping, it's been difficult to assess the current situation in these recent years. But according to a CSIS study from just a few years ago, they found at least 436 officially sanctioned markets located across the country. And in a micro-survey project in provinces throughout North Korea, they found that 72% of respondents received almost all their household income from the markets. Additionally, 83% of responders found outside goods and information to be of greater impact on their lives than decisions by the regime. Free North Korea Radio reports that there are now over or close to 5,000 markets all around the North Korea, including micro-sized grasshopper markets which hop around. And it's the women of North Korea who did this. Now, women are 70% of the escapees, so they have been our eyewitnesses. It is because of the testimonies of the women of North Korea, much like the two brave women you're about to hear from, we now understand the crimes of the regime. Their bravery as eyewitnesses in recounting what is happening has made us understand the crimes against humanity the Kim regime has been carrying out. Also, women have become rescuers. Many women are involved in the Underground Railroad. And I know one North Korean woman, I call her the Harriet Tubman of North Korea, named Lee Myung-ok, who's rescued over 7,000 men, women, and children. Women have also been very much involved in the information campaign to North Korea. We believe it is critical to reach North Koreans by land, by sea, and by air. And just to cite one brave woman, No Ye-ji, who works for Free North Korea Radio, she makes sure that news and hope is broadcast to North Korea every morning and every evening. Dr. Leanne Rand, the first North Korean defector to earn a doctoral degree, was recently elected chair of the Free Unification Movement, an organization composed of the North Korean defectors. Considering that women in North Korea are treated as having the value of a fly by the regime, this is another example of what happens when they're unshackled, that Dr. Lee would become elected by male and female defectors, her peers, to this high honor. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce two amazing women of North Korea to share their stories to help us understand what the women of North Korea face and how these two have triumphed over their circumstances to be advocates for the people of North Korea as free women. First, we're going to hear from Song-mi Han, who suffered great trauma as a child when her mother disappeared. She was eventually rescued through the help of her mother. In South Korea, she kept her identity hidden as a North Korean refugee until this year, after going through counseling to get through her childhood trauma. Song-mi is now a college student studying social welfare at a university in South Korea and a special assistant with Freedom Speakers International. She loves cooking and hopes to open a North Korean restaurant one day. And she did want me to share with you that she did come down with COVID, but she's here because she cares about all of you to be able to hear from her, and also because she cares so much about the people of North Korea. So despite being ill, she's here with us, which we deeply appreciate. It's also a great pleasure to introduce Min-hee Na, who will speak right after Song-mi. Min-hee Na grew up in North Korea's capital of Pyongyang before escaping to South Korea in 2015. She is majoring in communications at Ewha Women's University in Seoul. I love Ewha University. It's a great university. I've visited several times. She is a commentator and she's a TV personality in South Korea and a YouTuber. And she's also active with Freedom Speakers International and part of their Keynote Speakers Network. So let's welcome these brave women. And Song-mi, I'm gonna have you go first.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction to speak at such a meaningful occasion. This time of the year reminds me why I'm so lucky. Last week, I celebrated my 11th anniversary of freedom. March 19, 2011, along with two human smugglers, I escaped across the North Korean border into China as North Korean guards shot at us. Why am I lucky? Because I didn't get shot and I had a mom to rescue me from North Korea. There are many North Koreans who are not so lucky. Some get captured or even shot at the border. There are many North Korean children waiting for their mothers, suffering silently. North Korean refugees can speak out because many of you who are participating in North Korean human rights activities. Today, after giving some background information, I will talk about three main things. One, North Korean mothers who can only embrace their children in their heart. Two, North Korean children who feel unloved as they wait for their mothers to return to them. Three, many North Korean parents and their children struggle with each other after they are reunited because of guilt and hurt on both sides. Before I start, I do want to say there may be some North Korean refugees who may not agree with what I will say. I'm sharing my own experience and thoughts. First, as background, my name is Song Han. I was born in North Korea in 1993 and escaped in 2011. I was born in the middle part of North Korea, about 240 kilometers from North Korea's capital of Pyongyang. When I was there, I had no idea how close I was to Pyongyang. It seemed to be in another universe. I was born into an affluent family, but it fell apart when my father began beating my mother and they got divorced. I was only 3 years old. After my parents divorced, my mother struggled so much. We lived in a barn for 2 years. We were homeless for several months, and we often starved. My mom was the center of my universe. Then, when I was 12 years old, she suddenly disappeared. That leads to the first side of the story, the guilt of mothers who leave their children behind. This guilt can cause stress and psychological problems that often go undiagnosed in North Korea. Many North Korean mothers flee to China to make money for their children. Many choose to leave their children in North Korea because the escape is so dangerous. No one knows what is waiting for them outside of North Korea. Many plan to save money and return home. But that often doesn't go as planned because they are illegal refugees in China. They might become victims of human trafficking. When they can find work, they must conceal their identities. They know they could be arrested and repatriated to North Korea. They walk on thin ice every single day, worrying about all of these uncertainties. Many regret not bringing their children with them. My mom certainly regretted it and suffered so much. She drank herself to sleep every night when she was in China. Then there's the other side of the story, the hurt that children feel when they are left behind. When I was a child, I felt like I was stuck in darkness after my mom left. It was not easy. It was not easy on. No, it was not easy on. No, it was not an easy time. Every day for years, I waited my mom to return to me. When I heard the sound of the train arriving at the station near my aunt's home, I felt like my mom was calling me. I ran to the train station. Finally, one of my aunts told me that my mom was no longer in North Korea. I felt like I was to blame. I asked myself, why was I born this world? Will I ever see my mom again? When my neighbors said, your mom abandoned you, I knew it wasn't true. I knew she loved me, but that it was hard for us to have a good life in North Korea. It was a difficult life. As a child, I engaged in manual labor for years. I attended elementary school for only 1 year. I didn't even see a book several years. In North Korea, there are still many children who do not know where their parents are. They are homeless or left relatives. When they hear the footsteps of people passing by, they hope their mothers have finally come back home. However, some children don't even have that kind of hope. Many don't even remember what their mothers looks like. They consider themselves orphans and resent their parents. However, is it true that these children are abandoned by their parents? Then the most wonderful thing happened. My mom tried to rescue me. She had not forgotten about me. She saved the money to pay for my escape. It was the greatest day of my life. When I was finally reunited with my mother on October 3rd, 2011. So these are the sides of the story. Mothers feeling guilt and children feeling abandoned. What happens when they are reunited? It is not always a happy ending. I was suffering from trauma and I didn't know it. And I believe this is true of many other North Korean refugees. People may think because we have come together in freedom that there should just be love and happiness. But the rest of the story is often a challenge. 9 years after I escaped from North Korea, I began thinking about commit suicide. I was struggling so much in South Korea. I tried to find a reason to live. I tried to find something that could save me. I went to some counseling center and started individual and group session. Finally, I broke down and crying in front of one of the counselors. There are 10 North Korean refugees, 9 women and 1 man. We were all struggling. The first day of the counselor had us filled out a form with 150 questions. As I answered the questions, I could feel something bubbling up inside that I could not explain. I began crying. I looked around. I saw that all of the other women were crying, also crying. Then one day, in a group session, they showed us a video of North Korean mothers explaining why they had left their children behind in China or North Korea. I felt like they were explaining my mom's story. All of us were crying. I could finally understand a little bit better how my mother might have felt and how many other parents might have felt leaving their children behind in North Korea or China. Many North Korean children hope that their mothers will come back home someday. Their mothers live their lives blaming themselves for leaving their children behind. They feel so guilty that they bury memories of their children in their heart. How much longer must be these children and mothers live with such emotional pain and scars? Now I'm here delivering this speech. It was only possible because my mom brought me to South Korea. I sincerely hope that children in North Korea can reunite with their mothers in a free, democratic land and live their lives to the fullest, enjoying the freedom and happiness they deserve. I sincerely hope that this can come true someday for all North Korean children. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. My name is Min-hee Na. It is an honor to be invited to speak with you today. I was born in North Korea, where the universal human rights declared by the United Nations in 1948 continued to be ignored. Because of that, I didn't learn about universal human rights until I was 25 years old. Today, I would like to share my experience as a North Korean-born person who had the opportunity to live and work outside of North Korea. Unfortunately, even with that golden opportunity to live outside of North Korea, I was cheated by the regime and its representatives. We were exploited, and women like me had our rights violated even worse than our male counterparts. I hope by sharing my experiences that I can help raise awareness about the North Korean regime's human rights suppression of its own people wherever they are in the world. I would like to start by telling about my life in North Korea. I was born in North Korea's capital of Pyongyang. My father was a government employee and my mother was a middle school teacher. Upon hearing my parents' occupations, many people guessed that I had a privileged background. My parents were loyal citizens, but they could not work their way out of poverty with their meager salaries. We lived in a small studio and sometimes we survived on potatoes. I used to think that my family was poor because of my parents' professions. After I graduated from high school, I became a restaurant chef, hoping that I would eventually get out of poverty. Chefs in North Korea have opportunities to make a lot of money if they are selected to work in North Korean restaurants in China and Southeast Asian countries. I started working as a restaurant chef in Pyongyang, and one of my acquaintances told me that a North Korean sewing factory owner was recruiting workers for her factory in Malta. I didn't even know where Malta was located, but I wanted to be considered for the position after learning that it is in Europe. I imagined it would be a romantic place and that I could enjoy more freedom. I thought I could meet many international friends and learn English too. My first point, I learned from my own experience and that of others that the North Korean government and its representatives steal wages from North Korean overseas workers. The factory owner promised to pay me 500 euros monthly. She told me that 10 North Korean employers were already working in Malta, and some workers got paid 1,000 euros per month. The total monthly household income of my family was less than 2 euros. My monthly salary in Malta would be more than what my family could earn in 20 years in North Korea. I was determined to go to Malta, so I learned how to use a sewing machine. After preparing for 10 months, I arrived at Malta in October 2014. I started working the next day after I arrived. Initially, I worked 13 hours every day from 7 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. Instead of 500 euros, I was only paid 130 euros. All workers were furious about being cheated, but we had nowhere to complain. We knew we could be returned to North Korea and be harshly punished for causing trouble. We were kept in the dark about our exact salaries. I later learned that I had received less than 10% of what I was supposed to get paid. Every month, the manager made us sign a document written in English. I wanted to know what I was signing, but they kept us isolated, so I couldn't ask anyone. Everyone worked like crazy, and some skipped meals to save more money. There were 42 female workers from North Korea in the factory, with the youngest worker being only 19 years old. My second point is that we were exploited. I worked 13 hours a day in the beginning. If it were not the EU, I probably would have continued working for 13 hours a day. My coworkers who came a year earlier had been working for 13 hours a day, even during the Christmas season when everyone else in Malta was celebrating the holiday. Fortunately, the EU and Malta governments learned that North Korean workers in the factory were being exploited, and they started to investigate and crack down on the working conditions. The reputation of the factory got damaged to the extent that people stopped their orders from the factory, and as a result, our work hours got reduced. Outside pressure can work. We were still starting the workday at 7 a.m., but instead of finishing at 9:30 p.m., we could finish at 6:30 p.m. Originally, we only took Sundays off, but from then, we could 2 days off, both Saturdays and Sundays. For the first time, I learned that it is normal for people around the world to have weekends off from work. My third point is that women were controlled even more than the men were. With more free time, some of us wanted to earn extra money we had been cheated out of by working part-time at other places. But our request was rejected. The manager said because we were women, we might get kidnapped. I thought it was total nonsense, but I could not talk back to the manager. Because we were women, we were treated like prisoners in Europe. The only place we could freely go alone was the bathroom. We had to move in a group of 4 or more people, even when just going for a walk outside. As soon as the female workers arrived, the manager confiscated our passports and put us under tight surveillance. North Korean women could not share rooms with foreigners and could only live and eat with other North Koreans. If we said something positive about other countries, criticized North Korea, or were suspected of planning to escape, we would be sent back to North Korea immediately. The manager even censored the letters we sent to our family members in North Korea. Because North Korean workers could not own cell phones and there is no internet available in North Korea, the only way we could communicate with our family members was through written letters. The manager would read them first before sending them out to our families and would read the replies from our families before giving them to us. During that time, I was only a working machine who was not allowed to think, speak, and act as I wished. I was forbidden to speak with any non-North Koreans. I would be ridiculed if a European man talked kindly to me. The only place I was allowed to stay was my tiny bedroom and dusty workspace in the factory, monitored and brainwashed. I was like a hen living only to hatch eggs, locked in a tiny cage. What's worse is that everything I told you is not in a past tense. Even at this moment, there are many North Korean workers who are living this kind of life. The life of sewing factory workers in Pyongyang is even worse. I witnessed many factory workers and female seamstresses who were working nonstop only to get 20 kilograms of soybean oil per month. Female workers dispatched abroad had better situations than those in North Korea, but still we were cheated, exploited, and controlled as we were living in a free country. On November 29, 2017, the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 2397, which stated that all North Korean nationals earning income abroad had to return to North Korea. However, even now, there are countless female laborers working in sewing factories in China, working 16-hour shifts while having the North Korean regime take 70% of their earnings. I would like to urge you today that we need to take a closer look at the human rights issues in North Korea. We need to protect North Korean women who are being exploited that even receiving minimum pay. We need to pay more attention so that North Korean workers can be guaranteed their basic human rights. Also, as stated in the UN Security Council resolution, we must help those who are seeking to escape to freedom. To do this, there must be strict surveillance and management to ensure that the North Korean regime cannot confiscate the passports of North Korean workers. It wasn't until I was 25 years old that I learned about universal human rights. There are many North Koreans in the country and around the world who still are unaware of their basic rights as humans. If there is anything I can do for my family, relatives, and friends in North Korea who do not even have a clue about what basic human rights are, it would be speaking for them out loud so more people can be interested in helping them become free. I urge you keep paying attention to North Korean human rights issues until spring finally arrives in North Korea, until North Korea becomes a free nation. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to Minhee and Songmi for their powerful testimonies. And I have the great pleasure of now introducing everyone to Sydney Kochan, who is going to lead the Q&A portion of this. And speaking of brave, wonderful women, Sydney's one of those. She's been one of the leaders in helping us with all the work that we're doing with the UN Commission on the Status of Women. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Sydney for you all. And she will be the moderator for our panel session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, for the very kind introduction. It's an honor to be invited to moderate such an important event and to hear firsthand the testimonies of Songmi and Minhee, which truly shed light on the heartbreaking situation for North Korean women. And I commend them for their bravery in speaking out against the Kim regime's human rights abuses. The first question that I'd like to ask is to Songmi. As a child, what was the food situation like in North Korea for you and your family?
So usually we eating the grass. I don't know, is it grass or, yeah, it's grass. So usually we are eating grass because we didn't have enough grains or enough food. So, but especially the springtime and the summertime, it's more supporting about the food. So we are eating the grass, and sometimes also the winter time we are eating the, how can I say, mice. Did you know the mice? Yeah, but even I don't want to think about it because I hated the mice. But anyway, if human gets starved, anything wants to eat, just yeah. So it is a terrible situation in North Korea about the starving.
And Minhee, I'd like to follow up with you. Do you know if the food situation was any different in Pyongyang compared to other parts of North Korea?
Pyongyang is the most developed city in North Korea. You can find skyscrapers, restaurants, and other leisure and entertainment facilities in the city. Pyongyang receives the biggest government assistance and support. It represents the characteristics of the North Korean regime. It is a huge privilege to be born and live in Pyongyang. The North Korean government sets Pyongyang as the model city that other cities must look up to and learn from. If you are loyal to the regime, you can live in Pyongyang. The government constantly checks how loyal Pyongyang citizens are, and if they deem someone is not loyal enough, they move him to a faraway rural city. People outside of Pyongyang are eager to show their loyalty in hopes that they can move to Pyongyang someday. And Pyongyang citizens do their best to keep living in the city. This is an important way that the North Korean government keeps them under control. This is possible because the government blocks all outside information and keeps brainwashing its people that North Korea is the parasite that everyone is eager to live in. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It seems that both of our speakers shared some different stories. Songmi was sharing about how outside of Pyongyang, people that struggle with poverty have to rely on very, very simple foodstuffs and sometimes not even things that are technically edible. And Minhee shared that in Pyongyang, the provision of food is based on loyalty to the Kim regime. So that's very interesting to hear. My next question is for Songmi. You said you only attended 1 year of elementary school. Is that common in North Korea? What do you remember about attending school there?
Okay. I know that many children in the world don't want to go to school or they want to skip. But in my case, I really wanted to go to school for so long, but I didn't know how to write in Korean. I learned write based on spoken Korean. So if there are any different word with the unusual pronunciation, then I would not know that how to write them. I didn't see a book for several years. I didn't hold on pen or pencil for many years. Because I had to work. So from about the age of 9, manual labor. School was probably no problem for wealthy people in North Korea. But with poor people in North Korea, it is very difficult to go to school when you are starving and your family has to give the school some like a rabbit skins or like a wood, yeah, for grains. But so when I arrived in South Korea and I went to Hanawon, the re-education center, there were 13 students in my group. Four of students didn't go to school in North Korea. So yeah, I think maybe it's if there's a 10 students but 3 students doesn't go to school because they have to survive. So it's so, how can I say, poor.
Thank you so much. And Minhee, we will ask you a similar question. You lived in Pyongyang, as you mentioned before, and attended school there. What can you tell us about your school experience in Pyongyang?
From the mid-2000s, South Korean dramas and songs were very popular in North Korea. When I was 19, I used to watch Korean dramas with my friends secretly. Before I watched the South Korean dramas, I also believed that Pyongyang is the most wonderful place in the world, and I felt very grateful towards the regime that I can live in Pyongyang. However, in the dramas, South Korean society was not at all filled with beggars and poor people. I was deeply immersed in the romantic storylines, splendid fashion and streets, melodious OST songs, and so on. Then I realized that the North Korean government was lying about South Korea in many ways. I downloaded some of my favorite Korean songs and lent them to my friend, who was caught by a North Korean policeman. He threatened her to reveal the source of the songs or to have sex with him instead. Under the huge pressure, my friend revealed my name, and he kept calling me and threatening me, saying that I will need to pay the price for distributing Korean songs. In North Korea, watching South Korean dramas and American movies and listening to South Korean songs is considered an anti-state crime, which is subject to severe punishment. At the time, I got scared by the threatening phone call from the policeman. I was so afraid that I might go to jail and put my family in danger. I thought I'd rather die, so I swallowed a handful and sleeping pills. If my parents didn't find me quickly, I would have died then. There are many young people in Pyongyang who love Korean dramas and songs. They risk their lives to watch and listen to them. A friend of mine was caught by a North Korean policeman watching a South Korean drama. He had been beaten up for a week and then got released after giving numerous bribes to the policeman. Now I have a Netflix membership, but I am too busy to watch dramas. In South Korea, you can watch hundreds of dramas from many countries for a small amount of fee. But I want you to remember that watching dramas involves a huge risk in North Korea. You can even get shot for watching South Korean content. We must pay attention to North Korean human rights until everyone in North Korea has the right to freely enjoy watching any content they like. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Songmi, back to you. Were you able to access outside information or foreign media at any point while living in North Korea?
Actually, I didn't have time to watching TV because I was a manual labor for my aunt. So, but just barely, just sometime I was watching the Chinese drama or Chinese movies, or and then some of what there were some English movie too, but I couldn't remember the movie names. Yeah, but I didn't have enough time to watching TVs.
And Minhee, I wanted to ask you a bit about your time in Malta. You mentioned when you received news that you could work in Malta, that you believed it would be a place where you could enjoy more freedom. What did freedom mean to you at that time?
Yeah. Doing everything I couldn't do in North Korea meant freedom to me then. I wanted to do all the things I wasn't allowed to do before. Wearing jeans, watching dramas, and listening to my favorite songs, making friends from other countries, walking on the streets all night, and doing things without constantly being checked on, were some of the things I wanted to do. All these small things meant freedom to me. Thank you.
And just a brief follow-up question to that. Do you feel any different about the word freedom, or does it mean the same thing to you today?
I am very satisfied and happy now. I really enjoy all the things that I wasn't allowed to do in North Korea. Now I want to live in a more meaningful life. I want to share all the freedom and rights I have with my hometown people in North Korea. I think my life will be much more valuable if I work hard to make this possible for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Songmi, about your situation. You mentioned your mother's divorce. Do you know anything about the situation of divorce in North Korea? In particular, do divorced women typically suffer the same fate as your mother did?
So first of all, both sides must agree to a divorce. So women who are being beaten or dominated have a difficult time getting out of the marriage. After getting divorced, the people will gossip about the woman. In South Korea and other countries is more respect for women who are divorced. They don't, but in North Korea, it seems like they don't respect the women, because after the women got divorced, they like to just talking about oh, she got divorced. So talking is not, just respect, just what they want to say, just they talking. So especially my mom was she got divorced. After she got divorced, she was just, it's just she having supporting time after divorce because of people talking about her, and yeah. So but,
Thank you for
mhm.
sharing. Minhee, I would like to return to you now regarding your situation in Malta once again. What sort of surveillance were you under in Malta while you were working your job? Was there any sense of solidarity among the North Korean workers in Malta? Were you able to form friendships with them, or were you restricted from doing anything but work?
Yeah. North Koreans cannot go abroad freely. You have to get permission from the government. And when North Koreans go abroad, special security managers are always dispatched together with them. These managers are specifically trained by the North Korean government to monitor North Korean workers overseas. North Korean workers staying abroad must always report and obtain approval for all their activities in foreign countries. The managers always have some spies within the group, and spies regularly report what we are doing, saying, and thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. Somi, I would like to return to you now to ask you a bit about your escape. Could you share a little bit more about how your mother was able to help you get out of North Korea, and sort of what the process of your escape was and how much it cost? Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, she was sending us money to North Korea. So it was the same broker that my broker, but I don't know exactly because she didn't explain that the way, but I think she said that the cost was, I don't know how can I say the English, maybe Miss Unga can translate the 2천만 원, how to say the English, the 2천만 원 is. Miss Unga?
Yeah. 2천만 원 is $20,000.
$20,000.
$20,000.
Yeah, $20,000 when she brought me, but I don't know now. Yeah, so she said that it was not an easy because that much money to save. So my mom said, you must listen to me, because it was so expensive to, the cost of the brought. Yeah, so.
And sort of a follow-up to that, were there ever moments that you came close to giving up the idea of escaping North Korea? And if so, what was it that kept you going, that kept you pushing for an escape?
Oh, my mom. So because the most of them just, I want to see my mom because it's a long time I didn't see your mom. And then another thing was the first reason was the mom, and another thing was the study and my future. Yeah, because in North Korea, I thought I didn't have my future because it was so darkness. So I couldn't think about that. Should I stop here or should I go back to my aunt's house? I didn't think about that. Just I thought just let's move. Let's go to see my mom. So I can say my mom is the reason to come here.
Well, it's incredibly brave of you And Minhee, I would like to return to you next. Are North Korean foreign workers mostly female, mostly women? If so, why do you think that might be the case?
Yeah, since we were doing sewing works, most of the workers were women. In North Korea, sewing is considered women's work, so only women are dispatched as sewers to other countries. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And sort of a brief additional question. Are men and women treated differently in North Korea in any other ways?
Yeah. Women's rights are not guaranteed in North Korea. The injustice that women experience because they are women is prevalent. There is no punishment for domestic violence against women. When boys hit girls in school, the teachers scold girls to watch their mouths. In my college, there were male students who returned to school after completing their military service. They didn't hesitate to make sexual harassment statements to girls who were only 17 years old. Sexual harassment and molestation against women are not considered crimes in North Korea. There was a girl who was sexually assaulted by a boy in my junior high school. The rumor spread soon, but everyone criticized the girl for her inappropriate behavior. She was unable to come to class for a while, whereas the boy graduated from school without punishment or criticism. A female college student had an unwanted pregnancy and had an abortion. This incident was publicly criticized in front of hundreds of people in an auditorium. In North Korea, if a man gets married while attending university, he can maintain his student status and graduate without an issue. But if a woman gets married while attending university, she often drops out or is expelled from school in the worst case. Men can smoke freely in public, but women cannot smoke in public. In North Korea, women are not supposed to smoke, and if women smoke in public, they would be considered mentally problematic. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, and that really sheds light on the different treatment that North Korean men and women are subjected to. I'm going to return to you now, Songmi. You focused a lot in your speech on mental health. How did you feel about group therapy? Was that an effective form of assistance for you?
I would like to tell you that counseling saved my life. I had trauma, but I didn't know it. It was struggling with something inside me. Finally, in counseling, I could end my mixed feeling about my mother's leaving me in North Korea. So I mentioned, yeah.
You mentioned that you had to fill out a form with about 100 questions. Could you share a little bit about, what these questions were?
Okay, so the questions was like, so mostly was about my families, and then the father, about father and mother. The question was like, what does it mean that what does it mean father? What does it mean father means to you, and what does a mother means to you? What is a father for you? And yes, so those are like so many questions. It was this kind of question. And then what is it to family for you? Like, so it's so mostly like this kind of questions, but it was but mostly about the father question. It felt me, something like bubbling up inside that I could not explain, because I don't know about the father, because the father, I thought the father never hugged me and then never called me about my name. So I said just the father is just a scared man. So I don't know father means to me. I thought I don't have father. So yeah, so it was that's why it was the question was making me cry.
Thank you.
It was a
Yeah.
question.
And then just one last question about your counseling, and I wanted to know, how did you overcome your trauma? You mentioned that group therapy and group counseling was a great help to you. Did you have any other services or sort of sources that you could get help from?
So actually, it was already just group session and individual, but I think individual was so helpful because the counselor was just listening. But the first time I couldn't ready to speak out, but the counselor was keep asking. But the first time I was so angry about it because I don't want to think about the inside things. But so I was angry. Why you keep asking? So I forgot everything. So please don't ask me. But the counselor say was that, oh no, you're not. You want to think that you forgot that. So you're angry because you're getting angry because you're not forget everything. So you have to tell us and tell me so that you can get better. So yes, the individual was the helpful so much. And then also the video was they show us the one video about the why North Korean mothers left their children behind in North Korea and China. It was helpful so much because I thought my mom was, just forgot about me, but the video showed me that, wow, the old mothers are just there thinking about their children, and then so they didn't forget, but they didn't bring us because it is dangerous to escape. So yeah, it was so helpful.
Thank you. And that really, really sheds light on how important social services and therapy is for North Korean defectors across the world. I'd like to go back to Minhee for a question. Could you share about your life now and what you plan to do after you graduate from university?
Yeah, I want to let other people know about the reality of North Korea. I think it is something that someone must do, change North Korea and for the happiness of their loved ones living in North Korea. To make this possible, I want to study more. When COVID-19 situation is eased, I would like to visit the Berlin Wall in Germany. Thank you.
And Songmi, back to you for a similar question. Could you share about your life nowadays? We know that you are in college right now studying social welfare. What do you plan to do after this, and what are your hopes for your career?
Okay, so after finish school, I would like to continue to speak out about my story, and then I'm going to try have my own job about the food things. So yeah, and then care about my son. That's
Thank
it.
you. Thank you for sharing. Now we have two more questions and they're open to both speakers. Is there anything that either of you would like to say to the United Nations and NGO workers that are joining us today about how they can help women and children in North Korea?
Yeah, I think paying continuous attention to North Korean human rights issues is important. Specific and accurate investigations are needed on the life of North Korean women and children. We must make changes and improvements through continuous attention and efforts. Above all, it is very important to make it possible for North Koreans to question about women's and children's rights. To do so, North Koreans must be able to have access to more information about the outside world. Using as many methods as possible, we must accurately deliver the truth about the North Korean regime and the reason why North Korea is receiving sanctions. Majority of the North Korean refugees are women. They need protection. It is absolutely imperative that those who risk their lives for a new life have to risk their lives again. International attention and countermeasures are urgently needed. Thank you.
Thank you. And the same question for Songmi, if you'd like to share anything that you'd like to say to the United Nations and NGO workers that are joining us about how to help the women of North Korea.
Okay, I would like to say that please focus on the children in North Korea. They are just waiting for their parents and they think just, they probably feel unloved. So I hope that someday they can meet their parents and then they can reunite with their parents and then they can live in freedom. So yeah.
Thank you. And then the last question, which is also for both of you, if you could send any message to the people that are still living in North Korea, what message of hope would you say to them? And whoever would like to speak first.
So this big challenge of living in the outside world, it is better to live in freedom. My life hasn't always been perfect, but now I'm so happy that I will also tell them, isn't it incredible that I'm speaking to the United Nations and that I have written a book. In North Korea, I was voiceless, starving. I could only see darkness in my life. At last, I can see a future for myself. When people ask me how I am doing, I say, I'm doing great. I am breathing. I can see. I can hear. I'm grateful to alive. Every moment, I feel thankful to be alive and free to do as I want. I hope they can also enjoy that kind of freedom and one day.
Thank you. No, those are great words. And then if Min-hee would also like to share any message to the people in North Korea, what would you like to say?
I want to get freedom for all North Korean and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that concludes our moderated Q&A portion. I'm now going to turn the floor over to Casey Lartigue of Freedom Speakers International to share some remarks. And thank you once again to Minhee and Songmi for your testimonies and for engaging with the Q&A.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Suzanne, Jason, Sydney, Ungu, and all of the organizations that made this event possible. And of course, thank you to our witnesses, Songmi and Minhee. I am Casey Lartigue, co-founder and co-president of Freedom Speakers International in Seoul, South Korea, along with my co-founder, Ungu Lee. And I am co-author of the book, Green Light to Freedom, along with Songmi Han, who you heard from today. Freedom Speakers International South Korea has educated and empowered almost 500 North Korean refugees with English education, public speaking, and career development. Since we began operations in 2013, women have been 76% of our students and 75% of the participants in our Keynote Speakers Network. Our organization's mission has been to empower and educate North Korean refugees, and that is mainly meant empowering North Korean refugee women, since, as Suzanne pointed out earlier, about 72% of the North Korean refugees who've escaped to South Korea since the late 1990s are women. In closing, I will make 3 brief points. Okay? Number 1, it isn't easy for North Korean refugees to share their stories. So we know that many North Korean refugees have escaped to South Korea, not enough, and have escaped to other countries. But out of the 34,000 in South Korea and then a number of others in other countries, only about 20 North Korean refugees have published books. Okay? So even though they have these tragic and yet inspiring stories, many of them have not shared their stories in books. 2, it takes time for North Korean refugees to share their stories. Now, of that handful of North Korean refugee authors, it takes them on average about 10 years after they have arrived in a third country before they tell their stories. And that's even though many people ask them and encourage them to tell their stories. Now, this year, we're actually going to publish 3 books by North Korean refugees. Bong Hee Han, co-author of My Father's North Korea Story, it has taken her 17 years to publish her father's story in Korean and 20 years to publish it in English. And yes, it's available on Amazon, okay? My Father's North Korea Story. Yeongnam Om will be publishing his story later this year, and it has taken him 12 years since he escaped from North Korea to tell his story. Songmi, who you heard from today, was silent her first decade in South Korea, and it's only been recently that she's been speaking out. She gave her first speech last month on February 19th at a conference that we held. Minhee hasn't published a book yet. Maybe she will one day, but she joined us in 2017. At that time, she did not show her face publicly, and she did not want to be identified as being from North Korea, but she opened up, and now she's like a TV commentator, public speaker, and YouTuber. When we first met them, Minhee in 2017 and Songmi in 2019, it was unthinkable that they would ever speak out, and yet here they are today at this United Nations parallel event giving speeches. And then the third point that I'll make is that many people want to hear just like the most dramatic stories, the latest and hottest stories out of North Korea. Now, there are some North Korean refugees who are raising awareness about North Korea's human rights violations, and some of them have gone from being refugees to being defectors who have got something to say and are trying to do something. But let's also remember that there are many North Korean refugees who are just trying to heal their hearts, that they suffered in North Korea and China and even in South Korea. They struggled with adjusting, or they met the wrong people. And thanks to many of you who are here today, that you're some of those right people who are trying to make a positive difference in their lives. So thank you so much for everyone who joined. And then, of course, I have to just acknowledge Songmi that, she's got COVID. And she told me a couple of days ago that she tested positive for it, and she's been struggling physically. But she said that she was going to speak today, that she was not going to cancel. So I'm glad she made it, and hope that she'll be healthy soon. So thank you so much, everyone who watched. And you can find our organization, www.fsi21.org. Thank you so much.
All right. That was fantastic. You guys are amazing.
Thank you so much, Suzanne.
Thank you,
Well,
Suzanne.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody who took part in this, and Sydney, you did a wonderful job moderating, and our witnesses were outstanding. And we just thank everybody for being patient with us with the technical, some of the technical glitches. But Sangmi and Minhee, the messages we're getting are powerful for the responses to your testimonies. And we really want to thank you so much for your bravery in speaking out. And I want to thank Casey. That was a great way to talk about some of the amazing work that he's doing with his organization, and with Anku Lee. You guys are awesome. I do want to say that we couldn't have done this without Jubilee Campaign and without Jason being the person who's pulled this all together, making sure we could all hear each other and be together. I want to thank everybody in the audience. I do want to encourage you. I know there's a bunch of coalition members they're attending, but I know there's some new folks. But the main purpose of our coalition is to bring people together and to work together to find support for the work like Jubilee Campaign does at the UN, like Casey's doing with Freedom Speakers International. And that's really what our coalition does, is bring people together to fight for the freedom, human rights, and dignity of the North Korean people. We're not just involved in awareness, we're also very, very involved in rescuing refugees. We're very involved with the Underground Railroad. We're very involved with getting information into North Korea by, as I mentioned, by land, sea, and air. We are the backers of Free North Korea Radio, which is an amazing partnership between North Korean defectors who do the programming and Americans, freedom lovers who finance 100% of the cost of the transmission. And Free North Korea Radio will be covering this event tonight. So the messages that they shared will be shared with the people in North Korea. So again, thank you everybody for joining us. And I know, Jason, you wanted to say one final thing, I think. So,
Oh, well, I just also wanted to give my thanks to our wonderful speakers, Sydney, Casey, Suzanne, of course, as always. And for more information, as Casey said, you can find out about tonight's speakers at fsi21.org. To find out more information about the Freedom Coalition, we're at nkfreedom.org. And as you're leaving tonight, you will be redirected to our webpage. So thank you all for joining, and hopefully—
I forgot to mention, we do have a couple things coming up. April 28th, we have an interactive day of prayer and fasting. We'll have a prayer session, but we'll have a day of prayer and fasting. It's going to be, we're involving people all over the world, but we're going to have an online event the evening before that. And then we have North Korea Freedom Week coming up. God willing, it will be in Seoul. And the defectors are going to host us this year, but we encourage people from wherever they are in the world to get involved with the things that we're doing. And even with our coalition meetings, we have people participating. I saw that Mashika Sato is on from Japan.
Yes,
and Professor Wyszynski from Europe, from Poland. Yes, I see people they're in from all, and of course people from Korea. So thank you again.
And Lord willing, we'll be back in New York for next year's UN CSW. So if we don't see you before then, for all of you at the CSW, we look forward to participating with you all again in the future. So thank you again for everybody joining us this evening, and this concludes our event.
Bye-bye.